Hello, everyone, and welcome to another of these interview episodes. I'm Mike, and today with me a special guest from, I think this is the first time ever, from where the guest is speaking from. To get us started, do you mind introducing yourself and the game we're here to talk about?
Yeah. So, hi, my name is Wyatt White. I am the one half of Cake Neck Games, a small indie game developer based in Alaska. Here today to talk mostly about Provider, which is it's always hard to explain. It's basically an action-adventure game about a spirit whose job in the afterlife is to set other spirits to rest and solve their sort of hang-ups of life. So
we'll get to that part in a second.
Okay.
I have to bring up the obvious thing you just said. Is there a game dev scene in Alaska? Like, I've never been.
Yeah.
I always know Alaska as like the state full of oil. I'm not going to pretend I know a lot about it, but like I'm just kind of curious, kind of what that looks like.
Yeah. So actually, there is and there isn't. So as I understand it, there's myself, there's my co-developer George, who I've kind of brought into to help me with like art and modeling and stuff. There's a couple other developers. I think there's 3 total right now that I know of, apart from myself. And yeah, that is it. We have virtually no development scene here, so yeah.
It makes sense, because again, it's not like Alaska's known for a lot of people, so just percentage-wise. Right. You actually might be similar percentage-wise to most places. It's just there's not a lot of people.
Right, yeah, we have that that big handicap of we have, I think, 740,000 people here total.
For perspective, that's around the county I live in.
Right, yeah. Yeah. So and right now, so I live in Anchorage, which is the largest city in Alaska by a lot. We have, I think, 300,000-ish people here.
That's like half your state.
Yeah, it literally is like half the state. And if you include a town about 45 minutes outside of town north, and then the other random little villages and other towns that are technically separate but still essentially part of the major city, it's over half the state that lives in this one little spot. So it's a unique state, I think.
So we'll kind of get in with the Provider, but I'm kind of curious kind of how at that point then... So, because to me, I grew up around Chicago, so there's not a giant game dev scene, but there's something here, and we have monthly events, or these little things that you can kind of do to help get better as a developer, and then also test games and all that. Have you solely relied then on all that stuff basically on the internet to do that?
Yeah, so I started making games when I was really young, depending on how exactly you count, 14. So my entire development in making games almost exclusively has been just looking things up the internet, oh, I see, a Ludum Dare or Ludum Dare, however you want to pronounce it exactly. Do that and learn a little bit there, and just kind of building each project on well, I want to do this a little bit differently next time. I didn't have anybody really there beside me to be yeah, we're both developing things and we should help each other out. Just wasn't part of my experience at all.
Just so fast. It's just so different, and that's really fascinating to me. And again, I think it's because to me, I know Alaska is the U.S. and yada yada. But it's one of those places that just feels obviously very different than probably the rest of the U.S. So it's just always interesting.
Right.
So let's kind of jump into Provider. So as you said, you started. You are. I think the way you kind of said it, I think of it when I was reading stuff, is you are the ghost that deals with the other ghosts as they come in the afterlife. Is that what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's that's the easiest pitch, or the easiest way to describe it. The somewhat comical way the somewhat comical way I try to describe it is that it's an action adventure game in which you play a ghost that solves other ghosts' trauma by beating up monsters and finding items. the most concise way I can put it.
Immediately then, why did you want to become the ghost therapist?
Oop.
As I said,
I think I lost you there.
why did you want to become the ghost therapist? I have, like, because, like, I don't think I ever would have thought of, like, usually when you think of, like, people dealing with ghost games, it's like you are the person dealing with ghosts, or it's in
Right,
Afterlife,
right.
not the ghost that's already sitting there waiting for them to arrive and then helping them.
I think I'm having a connection issue here. I missed like a whole like 8 seconds of that.
Okay, we'll go again.
Give me 1 second. I actually think I have something on my end I might need to tweak.
Okay.
If we can, just pause for like 30 seconds here. I've had some connection issues with my home internet the last couple of days. Okay, sorry. Can we rewind a second there and
There was. So as I was saying, let me
Okay.
get my thought back. Yeah. Okay. So what's interesting to me always about these types of games, like when I picture either media or fiction and stuff in this games, it's always like you are like a therapist talking to a ghost or something like that. So like the classic Sixth Sense thing or something like that, where it's like this being not in, and I think ethereal plane, I think is the terminology. But like one kind of in Earth or one all the way. Why did you decide to base the story on being this thing that's already in that halfway point? Like, why is it the therapist on the dead end is what you wanted to be for this game?
Yeah, so it's a multifaceted question that's also like really simple at the same time. So the complicated answer is that I thought, I found growing up in Alaska, I spent a lot of time out in the wilderness, hunting on snow machines and with rifles and stuff. So like the loneliness of that is a pretty common thing, and I find it kind of without digging too much into like an existential crisis or anything, when you're out in the middle of nowhere alone and like it's a field of almost pure white, the sky's overcast, and so like it's hard to actually even tell what the difference between the floor, the snow extending out in front of you and the sky is. For me, it ends up being a very like oh, I could be dead right now. Maybe this is dead. Like, what is this like? Like, it's kind of hard to put that into into words exactly. But kind of trying to combine the feeling of that with the feeling of like, oh, okay, well, if I'm not sure, if this feels like, oh, maybe this is what death is like. I thought there was an interesting idea behind that, and then taking a spirit that's between the two worlds and having that spirit be responsible for guiding confused and lost, I guess spirits is the only word for it, between places and between, kind of where they've been and where they're going. But in a way where you're both kind of discovering it as you go along, if that makes sense.
No, I was gonna say, so I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, then part of the art style probably came from, I'm almost assuming partially necessity, but partially then it kind of represents that experience that you think of and you talk about there, because obviously that art style is a lot of like snow and white, and it's some level of stuff blending in, where even if you have limited art capacity, not saying you do or don't, you can probably make a contrast more, where it almost seems like a purposeful, like stuff blends in a lot more kind of when looking at the game.
Yeah. So part of that is I'm not a fantastic artist on my own, and I generally like start developing games sort of solo. I hunker myself down for a couple weeks and like just work on stuff, and I don't like show it to anybody. I don't, workshop or anything. I just kind of like put together like a thing of what I have in my head, and then I'll start showing it to people, and then kind of expanding the team out of like getting an artist on board, getting music on board, getting other design input and writing and all that. But like, yeah, part of my limitation of, doing it that way is that a lot of art assets that are generated early are very bad. And so when I like go back and like talk to artists, like, hey, okay, I want to kind of do this visually, the design aesthetic of my programmer art of like get it in there as quickly as possible, just so I can kind of see it in front of me, ends up carrying forward into making lots of like sort of simpler ladder shading. I try and make sure that environments hit a sweet spot between like being recognizable as like a building, as a field of grass, as a snow patch, as a little path, a footpath, in the woods. But I do try and avoid over detailing stuff, just because I think that readability is really important in a game, and like. And again, like part of it is from that, like growing up in a place where it's flat in all directions. Not all directions, but it's a very flat environment. There's not a lot of like mountains and valleys and stuff. Lots of just snow and river and little trees and stuff.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a replication of your environment, whether purposeful or not. Like, and I think it kind of, even you get like when you start talking about Alaska in the beginning, it's like, oh, I could see that when I was looking at the game, kind of. So we've kind of talked about this abstractly and broadly about the idea of the game. Let's kind of jump into it's a game. There's movement, there's action. So I know we said the player does these things like going to hunt monsters or collect things. Can you kind of talk about that like gameplay loop a little bit more? Kind of like if I'm a player and I pick up a controller, what is that experience in my hand?
Yeah, I mean, I can do my best with explaining it. It's not anything particularly complicated. It's a pretty simple. I don't know. I feel like you instantly curse yourself as soon as you bring up the game, which contains souls and is very dark. I know no one's gonna be able to crack that code, but like, I feel like personally, every time I see a game, a developer, even myself bring it up, like. I feel like I'm cursing myself immediately, but it is very much like taking inspirations from that particular game in that, your immediate actions are generally always, movement, slash with a sword or a knife or your fist, and then a dodge button. And you do later incorporate, a shield into the game as well. But I mean, really it's a pretty simple core loop that is much different from unnamed game. So I feel like it's not going to be too much that I don't think people are going to make that connection on their own. But you have a really simple, you sort of spawn into this camp. You have a nice little peaceful camp in which you're never attacked. There's never any like combat there. You have some friendly NPCs that kind of are all also dead, or they're creatures from other dimensions that are kind of passing through. It gets a little like, it plays a little bit fast and loose with what's the difference between like another dimension and like death. And part of that is to give us essentially if there is good sales, if there's interest in it, we wanted to leave some interesting avenues open for a sequel. But yeah, so you kind of spawn into your camp area. You got your friends. You talk. You refill on supplies. Find the new spirit that's around. They'll give you sort of a direction on where they died or what happened or what part of their trauma is, at least, or part of their hang-up, why they can't fully cross over. You then basically proceed to I guess it's best described as a post-apocalyptic version of wherever they passed away, and you battle through monsters that are usually. So then this is where it gets hard to explain, because to like explain what the zones are, you have to explain like, they're excluded zones, which are zones that are pulled out of the time-space continuum when great tragedy happens, or when tragedy happens, not necessarily even great. And so like our explanation and lore for the monsters is usually that they are an echo of whatever trauma happened there, though in some situations they're monsters that slip into the excluded zones from other dimensions again. that feed on sort of the energy of that negative event or that trauma. So yeah, that's why I'm like, hey, there's a simple answer, and then there's a complicated, weird answer that's steeped in dimensional, spiritual, lore, I guess, of the game.
Yeah, I was gonna say I could see where that
Yeah.
gets at least complicated. I'm curious, because there's an abstractness there because you don't want to ruin the story. I'm kind of curious as, I guess, both designer and player in the sense of is everyone who plays the game going on a set journey from A to Z, or is there some level of in-your-system variation from player to player, from like even if we're all going to experience the same things from the order we experience them, or is it kind of like this is much more of like a linear game in the sense of we're kind of all going on these same journeys?
Sure. Yeah. That's a really good question, and it's something that is actually one of my few answers that's very clean and straightforward. I think is that the game is essentially structured as a series of small open worlds. So it's there's a series of, I believe we have 12 total like gameplay zones or excluded zones. You unlock them in the same order every time. There's no real deviation there. Though how you go about, combat in there is generally completely up to you. There's, assortment of items, different modifications for your outfit. Excuse me. Different weapons, different items, different modifications for your suit that give you, you can carry more. You can have more health. You have more stamina. You have more energy meter kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, largely the game is structured in that every one of the open worlds, you kind of spawn in, you have a direction you're supposed to go, and there's a map and some compasses and stuff that help keep you oriented. But we don't ever like force you like, this is how you go, and now there's a running section, there's a jumping section, and there's like it's not like an Uncharted kind of thing where you're not railroaded, but where you're very much following a set path. I would compare it a lot more to another comparison that's going to get me in a lot of trouble probably is like Halo, where you have sort of these tunnels, which I would liken to our camp section, where like you're going from A to B, and that's the one path there is, and then it opens up into kind of a small sandbox or just a large arena.
Interesting. So in my head, when you were describing that arena-y thing, I was picturing much more of the idea of like a Hitman or a Dishonored or an arcade game, because this idea is what it sounds like, is like here are these giant planes that you have objectives in, but like you're not telling the player how to per se get to these sub-objectives, they just have to do these sub-objectives.
Yeah, and that's close, though. That is a comparison I'd hesitate to make, just because there really is, in most of the section or most of the excluded zones, there is like one target. There's not like there's not multiple ways to get there. I mean, there are multiple ways to get to the target, but generally there's only one target, and like it's more you're going from A to B, but you get to choose how you get there, rather than like a Hitman sort of like, you have to do B, but there's like a dozen ways you can do B, if that makes sense.
I get it. So it's kind of like this idea of like, oh, it's you walk in, there's 3 doors in front of you. All of them are at the end going to the end of the arena, but there's 3 doors.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So like, yeah, and like some of the levels are more linear, where they have you're clearing out buildings, or you're fighting giant spiders in a recycling plant, or like or which is much more linear. You're kind of following a little path, and then you're opening in a little area, and then you're following another little path. Or we have something where it's like you're trying to find berries to fulfill a folk story from the area I grew up in, where to put it really quickly, a crane loses its eyes because it wanted to eat berries, and you have to find berries to replace its eyes so it can actually see. It's ludicrous, but it's like a really well-known story in Western Alaska. And so like that's much more open. It's sort of, there's a small hallway at the beginning of the level, but then it opens up into a big field, and you just kind of have to like adventure around, try and find the berries, and then double crossing and larger story stuff, and then you win.
So I legitimately, as you shocking, had no clue about the story. So I'm now terrified of the story.
Oh no, it's not a scary story. It's one of the few stories that they would tell us in. So we where I grew up is Western Alaska's Bethel, Alaska. It's a small town of like 6,000 people. And we had a Yupik class, which is the native language in the area. And in that class, we heard lots of stories, of like legends and stuff like that. And this was like legitimately like the one that's not terrifying or deeply disturbing. Like it's just like, oh, the crane has blue eyes now. How did he get blue eyes? Well, he lost his eyes when he was eating berries. And of course, there's like the moral of like, when your parents call you back, come back. Or if you look at it from the other way, like, don't cry wolf, basically, kind of thing. And that's something we wanted to make sure I brought into the game of like, here's a story that, most people probably haven't ever heard of outside of this small town of, 6,000 people. So.
But yeah, no, I'm sorry, we don't have any story about that. Yeah, that could be, again, that's just interesting to me. So,
yeah, sure.
Kind of to wrap this kind of from a gameplay point of view especially is, obviously there's a couple types of things players do. You said there's collecting, there's some slaying. How did you what was your philosophy of this balance for players of what they should be doing in this game? Was it just kind of like, hey, we went, it's combat first with a mixture of everything else? Was there a purposeful, kind of combination of stuff going on, kind of so players on a board?
Yeah, so this is maybe going to reveal how terrible of a developer I am. But yeah, so originally started out, the project before this had been a very heavy narrative-based, sort of likened it to a TV show, like a Buffy kind of thing, where there's some action going on, but it's mostly about people sitting around talking. It completely fell apart due to some conflicts with the other person writing it, who actually also wrote Provider with me. But so it's all started out as just like, all right, screw this story stuff. Like, I'm just gonna make a game where you go to these zones and these areas and collect items and fight monsters, and that's gonna be it. Because I love Stalker. I like the 3 Stalker games that came out. Oh, excuse me. I love the 3 Stalker games that came out, and part of my love of that is I like to just like quietly picking through an environment, just like looking for items, looking for enemies. Keeping my head up, but just like looking for new stuff. And I wanted to bring that into a game and kind of put for lack of a better word, like an Alaskan spin on it. But yeah, so, and then as that developed, I was like, oh, okay. Well, we can make it a survival crafting game. And so then it became much more weighted towards like you had to kill the monsters to get items, to like build new items. And then I remembered that I really hate survival crafting games, so like that kind of went out the window, and then I sort of put together a basic story, and so that's where, and then it swung again to being like a very story-heavy, very conversational game about talking to ghosts and sort of like, figuring out what's going on with them, and they would point you to the items that were the important new items that you could use to fight. And then I remembered that, I just burnt a year of time almost on a massive narrative game that like just didn't work out. And so I at that point I kind of started to like rebalance, and I was playing some Dark Souls 2. I mean, excuse me, Unnamed Game 2 that includes Darkness and Souls. And I was like, oh, okay, like I really love this like kind of slash dodge, like the hit and the dodge. I really love the rhythm of game, but I can't do the bosses. Like I spend too much time coding and drawing and like writing stuff. I'm not that dexterous with games, so like I love those games. I love the atmosphere, but I just can't play them for more than an hour or two, because once I get out of like the opening area, my skills are so quickly eclipsed that I just like get frustrated and don't play anymore. But I thought, okay, so I could bring some of those gameplay elements in and make it less about building items and grinding gear, and more about like finding interesting items, interesting weapons, and kind of fighting these enemies. And that's when the sort of format of like the excluded zones and the ghost or the spirit requests and all that kind of came into focus, and was actually able to start like building the game for production rather than just prototyping out weird stuff. There was also a time where it was going to be like an Animal Crossing sort of thing, where like, oh, it's going to be like Animal Crossing, but you go and fight things with your items that you kind of find over time, over like real lifetime. That was a really bad idea. But yeah, so
goes, if you want to ever worry about continual user engagement, what you do is you create all the content ahead of time and just unlock like an item a week, and you just made like hundreds of items ahead of time.
Right. And that's definitely I have a pitch document that has something like 50-ish paragraphs of like just random game ideas and like mechanic ideas. and and yeah, like Animal Crossing, but you have to explore, a random wilderness, and like you get items on a timer, and you have to grow new items and stuff is definitely on there, and an idea that I love, but also I'm not currently like design-wise equipped to actually do, for sure. But
since like I'm actively finishing up, like we're about to launch a game on Steam, and one of the things I'm working on is like, so we're doing like it's a clicker, so we're doing a bunch of like events throughout the year, like a lot of games do. And I was working on the backend system today of just kind of being like, so this way when the content's done for live events, we could just shove it inside the system, and it will just kind of on the correct dates unlock stuff moment.
Right. Yeah.
Which is always the thing. It's like, because in my head as I go, great, we have to do it the first year, we'll do them as they happen, and then every year after that, then the system just kind of runs itself, right, hopefully, and I don't have to deal with this every goddamn year of the rest of my life.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, I recently, my previous release is a mobile game called Disc. It's about just dog sledding game. It's a real simple, like, little time waster kind of game. But it has a similar idea of, like, every Saturday there's a special race, and then, like, every holiday it's basically just set up on a timer. The beginning of every year it just generates new dates, and like, yeah, there's a Christmas race, you can get a special sled for that, and I just update that every so often with like a new sled or two, and it does
in theory new players never saw the new events, so then in theory they all get, at least it's like this idea of like continuity of new content, but like limiting the amount of work we have to do, because like
right it's almost
it's not that, it's a time problem.
Right, yeah, and it almost automates, special events and stuff like that, which I on one level, I'm really proud of it, because I think it's a fun game, and, like, I mean, my wife was, of her own volition, addicted to it for months, and, like, my parents and, like, random people from my hometown that I don't even know have, like, sent messages like, oh, it's great, it's amazing, it's not anything special. It's actually terribly built. It was a weekend jam game that I, like, continued to add on to for, like, 6 months. So it's just the ricketiest bridge with just suspension struts coming up out of it for no reason, just because you need to support one little thing, and it's ridiculous. But like, yeah, that sort of like not endless churn, but like the ability to kind of have like new pop-up things of like, oh hey, there's a special race this weekend where you can get $10,000 if you win, or like it's Christmas, you can get the special Christmas sled today, and there's a new one this year. Is an enticing concept for me, at least as a developer, for sure.
Closes out. So obviously the game we talked about is Provider. Mm-hmm. It comes out, it says here on Steam, November. Is that still accurate?
Yes, yeah. So we did just push back the release date like a couple weeks ago. Yes, November 26th. It should be on store shelves. Well, metaphorical shelves, yes.
Is 6 weeks from today, I think? Or from tomorrow, from us recording?
Yes.
That looks
yes,
right.
I believe that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think from this coming out, I think 5. But yeah, still, it'll be out soon. Provider. So that means go wishlist the game. As I need to ever tell you want every wishlist humanly possible.
Of course.
I started teaching family how to download Steam just to get more wishlists.
There you go, yeah. Even if you're going to buy it on itch.io, or because we're also coming out on itch.io and the Play Store, even if you're going to buy it there, you should definitely wishlist it as well. Because
Steam's backend is really fun to convince it to even feature a game anywhere.
Right, yes. It's a good time.
Well, thank you again for talking to me today. To finish us up, give people, they have your undivided attention, what is your closing argument of why people should go check out your game?
Oh man, I've been told many times that I'm really terrible at selling my own stuff, especially to people who aren't like games people. I would say if you want a collection of like 10 to 12 short stories, depending on how you count them, written by people in Alaska about weird stuff, you should play the game. And you also like to fight monsters and dodge and smash stuff. That is another good reason to play the game. And, that's the best I got.
Perfect. Well, I think that's good enough. Well, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yep. You too. Thank you.
This episode is partially brought to you by the Humble Choice Program. Did you know Humble Bundle has a great monthly subscription service that lets you get a ton of video games every single month? That's right. From plans range from $5 to $20 a month, you get a hold of a bunch of free games they have available to you. And you could use our code down in the description below to go and sign up. It would help our podcast and help you see what great games are available for you this month.
This podcast was a production of the SWW Show. To learn more, go to theswwshow.com. Remember, you can follow the show on Twitter at the SWW Show. You can follow me at Mikey_Maroney. You can follow AJ at LowSeatBoy. Remember, new episodes premiere on Friday, 9 a.m. Central Time on anchor.fm/SWW and podcast services around the globe.